Good afternoon. My name is Gatel Sear. I'm the League of Women Voters of Arizona's Advocacy Vice Chair, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the first in our series of virtual lunch and learns for our 2026 Legislative Lobby Week. These expert-led conversations, which we hold every year during the League's Legislative Lobby Week, explore Arizona's legislative landscape and provide practical tools for effective advocacy. Our sessions are open to our members and to the public, and I want to stress that because, as I said, this is the first, and we have a series of sessions coming up. There is still time to sign up for other sessions, and we encourage all of you, panelists and attendees, to share the registration information widely with your personal and professional networks. I will put the link in the chat in just a minute so you all have it. Today's program is presented in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Metro Phoenix, one of our 5 local leagues, and features a distinguished panel of Arizona media experts who will explore how political, economic, and legal pressures on newsrooms have evolved, identify the most significant legal threats to First Amendment protections, and examine the key trends emerging from this year's legislative session and the upcoming election year, and also reflect on the growing role of youth in defending press freedom. Throughout, our speakers will offer practical insight into how Arizonans can better understand these challenges and support a strong and independent press. I will now turn the program over to Kara Pelletier, who's our League of Women Voters Metro Phoenix president. Kara, over to you.
Thank you, Gatel. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining the League of Women Voters Arizona media session, part of our 2026 Lunch and Learn virtual program. My name is Kara Pelletier, and I'm honored to be here with you today as president of the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Phoenix. Today's topic is critically important: the First Amendment and freedom of the press. We are living in unprecedented times. Fundamental rights enshrined in our Constitution are increasingly under attack. There are numerous groups, including within our own government, seeking to weaken or redefine these protections. Democracy depends on a free press to hold those in power accountable. It also depends on the right of individuals to freely express their grievances against the government without fear of retaliation. As we've seen, attacks on these rights continue to escalate, often because they stand in the way of powerful interests seeking to reshape how our country is governed. Without these protections, our democracy is not sustainable. That is why it is essential for the people of the United States to stand up and defend these rights. The League of Women Voters is uniquely positioned to engage in these good trouble fights, educating, advocating, and empowering voters to protect democracy. That commitment is exactly why we've organized today's Lunch and Learn, bringing together members of the press and a journalism educator to help us better understand what's at stake and, more importantly, what can we do about it. Thank you for being here and for your commitment to defending our democracy. So today's program, you just had you're almost through most of it. You're through welcome remarks, and we're going to have a couple of tips for the meeting because we are in a webinar format to make sure all of our guests and panelists are aware of some of the functions of the webinar. Then I'm going to turn it over to Emra, who will introduce the moderators, the presenters, and then we will have a Q&A towards the end of the program for our guests to use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature of your Zoom, in order to ask questions. Let's go into the tips for the meeting, Gretchen. So use the Q&A tool, not your chat. I know you're often used to using chat, but for the purposes of today, use your Q&A tool. The moderator Emra, will be posting questions to our speakers. If you have any unanswered questions throughout the program, our advocacy team at the state will endeavor to get any responses organized and communicated back. If you have any questions about the League of Women Voters or advocacy at all, please address them to lwvazadvocacy@gmail.com. And also, this session is being recorded, so everybody needs to be aware of that. and it will be available later on the LWVAZ YouTube channel. I think we are ready for our next slide. Before we get into the formal program, I did want to spend a minute in case there's any guests who are not familiar with the League of Women Voters. I'd encourage everyone on the call to join the League and donate. We have a lot of incredible programs going on at the local, state, and national level to defend the democracy. So the League is 106 years old. We're a nonpartisan political activists and grassroots organization committed to ensuring voters play a critical role in our democracy. We do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. We advocate on issues that align with our carefully developed public policy positions. The League has over 800 state and local leagues, and our local and state leagues lead grassroots initiatives. As you will learn more throughout our Lunch and Learn sessions this week, just how much grassroots we really do have down at the legislature. Our mission is to empower voters and defend this democracy. And for us, a democracy is where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. Now let's move into our main program. Please allow me to introduce our fellow League member, Emra Muslim. She will be our moderator for today. She currently serves on the League of Women Voters Metropolitan Phoenix Board, and she is the membership chair. Emra.
I've got to turn on the video.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Looks like I'm in.
Okay, sounds good, Mary. Give me a call back if you have any more problems.
Hello. So I will go into the introduction of our wonderful panelists. So first up is Girard, who is from the Arizona Capitol Times. Girard is a senior state house reporter at the Arizona Capitol Times, where she covers the Arizona State Senate. Previously, she covered the Oklahoma legislature and the city of Oklahoma City for the Oklahoman. She earned a master's degree in investigative journalism from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University, where she reported on lithium mining in America after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Jordan was born and raised in Minnesota, where she earned her undergraduate degree in journalism. When she's not bugging senators, she likes hiking and paddleboarding. Next up, we have Erin Coyle from the ASU Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. Erin Coyle is an associate professor of media law and the First Amendment in the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, and an affiliate faculty member of the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University. Her research focuses on free expression, access, and privacy rights. She teaches media law and journalism classes in the Cronkite School. She worked as a journalist before earning a doctoral degree in mass communication from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She served on the First Amendment Law Review while completing courses in the UNC School of Journalism and Mass Communication and the UNC School of Law. Next up, we have Mary Jo Pitzl. Mary Jo Pitzl is a longtime Phoenix journalist, recently departed from the Arizona Republic after 45 years and now doing occasional work as a freelance writer. Her long tenure at the state's largest newspaper put her at the center of many issues involving press freedom. Most notably, her work led to a change in how the state universities and state agencies in general conduct their job searches. As president of the Arizona First Amendment Coalition, she added the coalition's voice to restrictive policies and ultimately rejected by the NFL on sports photographers. Now running on her own schedule, she helps run a journalism contest that recognizes the best work in 14 Western states. The contest uses its proceeds to fund First Amendment hotlines in the West. Mary Jo is currently trying to find a balance between getting a garden to grow, home improvement projects, travel, and still reporting and writing on important topics in Arizona. Next, we have Nicole Ludden from Arizona Agenda. Nicole Ludden is a reporter at the Arizona Agenda, where she covers the antics of Arizona's legislature and the policy fights shaping the state. She previously covered local government for the Arizona Daily Star, and before that worked at the Tucson Weekly and in the Arizona Republic's newsroom. She's a graduate of ASU's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. And last but not least, we have Alysa Horton. Alyssa is a graduate student at Arizona State University. She currently lives and works in Washington, D.C. while completing her final semester of graduate school. She has interned at the Arizona Republic, Arizona Foothills Magazine, and the Arizona Agenda. She was the 2024-2025 editor-in-chief of the State Press, where she led the newsroom in day-to-day coverage and coverage of the 2024 election. She's currently reporting for Cronkite News, which is produced by the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University. Welcome, panelists. So now we are going to go ahead into our questions, and we ask all attendees to save their questions for the Q&A portion of the program. So our first question is for Jordan. What issues or dynamics should Arizonans be paying closest attention to as we move into this election year?
Oh boy, hitting me right out of the bat. I mean, kind of, first of all, what they're interested in, especially if you're kind of not really new to politics, but just getting started being interested in politics, or, just getting your feet wet for the first time, find something you're interested in and follow that topic. Of course, we always have the big issues at the Capitol, water, education. Affordability is something that they've really tried to focus on this year, especially from the Democrats, and the Republicans too have a few bills that would, focus on affordability. So that's what I see right now. I'm not sure what the other panelists see out there, but that's kind of the topics taking point.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other of our election gurus want to add? All right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned water because that is also one of the focuses at the league we're trying to sort of gain traction on, and it's definitely one of Arizona's main problems as well. So next up is a question for Erin Coyle. From a media law perspective, where do you see the greatest legal threats to freedom of speech and press today, and what should citizens know or do to help safeguard those First Amendment protections?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Freedom of speech and of the press play important parts of the legal and social fabric of the United States. These freedoms protect crucial rights for people to discuss, debate, and question government actions and issues. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution provides protection for the communication of information and ideas, and it protects this against governmental restraints. Of course, it's important for us to know that the protection against these restraints is not absolute. There are circumstances under which government restraints on speech and media content may be justified. Still, it must be and it should be challenging for government actors to demonstrate that restrictions that target specific messages are constitutional. Okay. Sadly, threats to freedom of speech and of the press have grown in recent years. FIRE's National Speech Index Tracker found in January 2026 that 73% of their survey respondents in the United States believe that this country is heading in the wrong direction when it comes to whether people are able to freely express their views. In 2025, the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index classified global press freedom as being in a difficult situation. So it's important for us to know that the stresses the press in the United States are feeling and experiencing right now are not entirely unique. For the first time since Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index addressed press freedom globally, ranking press freedom in 180 countries, they found this very difficult situation, in part due to concerning economic pressures on the journalism industry. Journalists globally have been facing harassment, intimidation, as well as government restraints. It would take more than 2 hours for me to go through like a laundry list of very concerning threats to press freedom and freedom of speech in this country alone in recent years. That said, I still have great hope for freedom of speech and freedom of the press in this country, in part because of events like this, showing that people understand these rights are fundamental in this country, and people are willing to address the importance of these rights and to stand up for these rights. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well put, Erin. And, I think knowledge is power, and the League does such a great job at, garnering civic education for the entire community. And these are some pressing times we've definitely seen, especially with some of the ICE protests, how journalists and specifically independent journalists are being targeted. And so, yeah, we want to support our journalists and our media the best we can. So next up is a question for Mary Jo Pitzl. Based on your experience inside a legacy newsroom and now as an independent journalist, how have pressures on freedom of the press, such as political, economic, or legal, which Erin has addressed some of them, changed over time in Arizona? And what is one specific way the public can support local journalism to protect a free press today?
Thank you. Well, to answer the last question first, probably the one thing you can do is subscribe to these journalism publications and read them, and subscribe to a wide variety of publications as your budget allows. Journalists don't work for free, and it's become increasingly a struggle to have enough revenue to keep operating, especially a legacy newspaper such as the Arizona Republic, where we still run it through a printing press, put it on paper, drop it in your driveway. Those costs are very expensive, and not to mention salaries for the staffers. So one of the things that's changed a lot is just the whole evolution of the media landscape, and where legacy newspapers are less emphasized. They, obviously we've had, hundreds of newspapers close. We just saw the deep cuts at the Washington Post, 2.5 weeks ago. And this has all been triggered, largely because we've moved to a digital universe. That's opened up a lot of opportunities. And I will say that even though it's, easy to get really glum and down about things, as in all my years at the Republic, as I watched some of my colleagues leave, they almost all found jobs in journalism. They weren't leaving the industry. They were looking for better opportunity, better salary, etc. So there are some glimmers of hope out there. But the changing technology is a big issue. On top of that is that, in our very divided nation right now, people tend to move towards platforms that they agree with, that say things that they agree with, and are not necessarily looking for the full story. And that's very, very concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you mentioned that, Mary Jo, I think about the funding cuts for NPR and PBS, which have, impacted the media industry as a whole. So thank you so much. Next up is Nicole Ludden. What trends have stood out to you most in this legislative session so far? We're going into crossover week, either in policy priorities or in how lawmakers communicate with the public.
Yeah, I think one trend I'm noticing more this year, especially heading up into an election season, is sort of this fracturing of Republicans and more culture wars type bills getting more attention. It's not necessarily issues that your general broad constituency really cares about, like reading to drag queens, but it does signal to your base. I'm seeing that a lot more. And I'm also seeing very strategic messaging campaigns like affordability with Democrats, and just key ways in which we see the legislation being run, signaling to somebody's potential race or where they're running, like Alexander Culloden running sort of elections type bills as he's running for secretaries of state, um, and other things like that that seem to correlate with the upcoming election.
Yeah. Have you seen any emphasis in like citizens initiatives or like the House or Senate concurrent resolutions since we are going into an election year?
Yes, the list of ballot referrals is insanely long. We'll see how many actually make it past the point of, making it on the ballot. But that's definitely something we're seeing this year, especially with measures that Katie Hobbs vetoed last year. Um, Almost every bill that's super important to a lawmaker, they will also run or only run as a SCR or HCR, which is the bill naming mechanism that indicates this is something they want the voters to decide to get past Hobbs's veto.
Yeah. Have you noticed any shifts with like any voter blocks or Arizona voters in general since 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. This was also a big issue last year, but I mentioned the base signaling thing. We're seeing a lot of efforts like that to change voter registration techniques, the early voting list, and things that a Republican base definitely sees as reforms that Arizona's election system needs. And I am seeing that take up a lot of the ballot referrals we're seeing, that things that would ultimately make it harder for you to vote.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Nicole. And obviously, like the league is working on analyzing a lot of those bills and pushing our members to request to speak as well. So up next is Alysa Horton. So from your vantage point in Washington, D.C., where I assume you are currently, how does the political atmosphere around freedom of speech and the press differ from what you see in Arizona? And how do these dynamics influence coverage at both the national and state levels?
Hi. Yeah, I feel super honored that I've been able to, at my young age, experience both state and national politics. What I can say is from DC, there's still an emphasis that state politics often come first. It's the first place that constituents get affected. And we know that here in Washington, and sure, there's lots of big bills and, large conversations about national politics, but it starts at the home front. Um, what I've gotten to see and cover here is two Arizona representatives, Rep. Schweikert and Rep. Biggs, are both running for Arizona governor. So watching them try to balance, you know, uh, working for the people they currently represent and running a campaign has been really interesting. And I think the most important thing to remember at all times is whether politicians are in Washington or in Arizona, they work for you. They work for us. So getting to cover those things and make sure that there's a priority on the constituents and holding them accountable to their constituents is the most important thing we can do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a student journalist, where do you see youth voices fitting into this moment? And what can young people and those who support them do to meaningfully defend press freedom?
I am still trying to find where my young journalist voice is. It's an industry that's dominated by really successful people who have a lifetime of covering politics, and I'm often the youngest in the room. I'm the youngest in the room, and I'm a woman, so that's a double hit when you're at at Congress. I think the most important thing is pay attention to who you're reading. If every time you open an article, you're reading the same perspective of someone who's written for 50 years and it's a man, mix it up. You know, everyone is doing their best to find a place they fit into the system that's uh, dominated often by men and older men. And I think it's really important that you pay attention to who you're reading, find loyalty and support the people you're reading, but also expand it a little bit. Um, give young people a chance. I'm learning so much now, and I think that I have a fresh perspective that, maybe some lifetime journalists don't have. I still have a glimmer of hope in my eye for journalism, and I know that that's something that's kind of fading away a little bit. So, I think the most important thing is support women in journalism, support young people in journalism, support the people who have dedicated their lives to this. But also remember that you should expand your readership to lots of people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I'm super glad that you brought up hope, and multiple of you have. And I think it's such an important emotion and feeling to have in this moment. So now we are going to go into our Q&A portion of the program. So attendees, please feel free to use the Q&A feature and ask your questions. So we have one from Carolyn, and this anyone of the panelists can answer. Can you discuss the freedom of speech issue that Arizona Senator Mark Kelly brought in his recent lawsuit against Secretary of Defense Hegseth?
Sure, I'd be happy to jump in. I mean, Kelly was defending his First Amendment right to speak. As he said repeatedly, it was speech, not an action, not an act, of hostility or menace towards the defense secretary. He was speaking, his mind and his concerns that perhaps military members might be coerced or pushed into carrying out policies that are illegal, and just wanted to remind people. Now, it came at a very convenient time, and I'm sure there's a lot of politics behind it, but nonetheless, it was an exercise of free speech, and the court saw through that right away. And but I think we've yet to see if he's going to get his pension. What will happen to his pension? I'm actually not right up to speed on that. But that was fundamentally just an ability to speak his mind, as did the other 5 or 6 Democratic lawmakers who joined him on that video.
Absolutely.
I can speak on it a little bit. I've been reporting on it from DC, so I was actually in the courtroom when they filed the injunction, and the judge heard it. And I'll tell you what, like seeing so many people show up to not even necessarily protest, but make clear the value they feel in the First Amendment. They filled the rows of seats in the courtroom, and it was your average people who showed up and who showed that they care about what happens, because this was a First Amendment issue. And the judge pushed time and time again against U.S. attorneys, and made clear that the First Amendment would come out on top. And I think seeing so many people show up it was a random day of the week at 4 p.m., watching people show up for these things matters, and your presence is important. So, I mean, just even seeing it here in DC, it's felt not only by Arizonans, this is a national conversation that's happening.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people can resonate with like freedom of speech. I think it's such a fundamental right of our American democracy. And Alyssa, like that's amazing that you had an opportunity to like be there, and all those people showing up like made an impact. And at the end of the day, we can still have some faith in our institutions and our judicial system to do the right thing and, follow the process. So thank you so much. Anyone else have anything to add? Yes, Erin?
Kara has her hand up too.
Yes, Kara.
Oh, I didn't want to finish up here with this question. I have a question I can't ask because I'm a co-host through the Q&A. I thought I would just ask it verbally.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready, Imran.
If Erin, you didn't have anything, did you have any? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, happy to. Well, so First Amendment law is really nuanced when we start looking at people who are government actors, whether they are government employees or whether they are in public service. And recent Supreme Court opinions have provided some guidance related to the level of First Amendment protection that they receive. Okay. That said, I think it's a very important point that he is fighting for his First Amendment rights through the judicial system. And addressing chilling effects that we see in society right now as there is increasing pressure from government and from society for people to become fearful, to address views that may not be popular or that may feel controversial. It's very important to see these lawsuits addressing chilling effects and to see that judges are recognizing that chilling effects are problematic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erin. Kara, do you want to ask your question?
Could I just jump in to just sort of amplify what Erin was saying? It really was an example of leadership, because there are so many people who are afraid, nervous, intimidated into speaking out. And if we don't have the people up at the top of our political system, exercising that right and, silencing themselves. And I think you could say that about some members of Congress who we know don't always agree with Trump, but aren't speaking about it. It's important to see that leadership that Kelly and then Alysa, Senator Slotkin as well exercised.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think the fact that he was or is a senator made an impact about the media attention and the overall, national impact that this made?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, if it was, Mark Jones, who care? But Mark Kelly is a name that people recognize. And as I said earlier, there might have been some political, beneficial uh, aspects of that for him. It's raising his national profile, but it's certainly well within the law, and he's winning on the issue right now.
Yeah, and can I amplify what Mary Jo was saying as well? So when we're teaching the basics of journalism, we often talk about what news values are. And one of those core news values is prominence. So when we have a US senator, that is a very well-known person who is more likely to receive attention from the news media and from the public. And we have that combined with the conflict and controversy. So that makes it much more likely to receive higher levels of attention.
Thank you so much, Erin. Kara?
Yes, thank you. Does the panel, would there be any benefit to bringing back laws such as like the fairness doctrine to try to help balance the integrity of what Americans are being subjected to daily? Is there any or any other type of law or legislation that you all think would help support freedom of the press? I just wanted to throw that out and see if there was any opinions about that.
I mean, I think I see some examples of other types of legislation, um, such as legislation to fund state level coalitions that provide funding for grants or for fellowships to provide more local journalism in a way that news organizations can remain independent from government. Okay? While the fairness doctrine is defunct, many of you have probably received questions as well in the last week about what was Stephen Colbert talking about in the last week, about what are called equal time rules, that sometimes are described as a modern part of the old fairness doctrine, in which broadcast channels have FCC regulations that require within a certain amount of time period from an election, if they provide coverage outside of news organizations or talk shows, that if they provide coverage of one candidate running for public office, that they'll have to provide equal time to another candidate for public office. So there are some rules that still exist to try to provide a more level playing field for candidates for public office. The fear I have with rules and regulations about what media have to convey is number one, potential interference with First Amendment rights. And number two, what happens to the independence of the media when we have those laws or rules?
Anyone else want to jump in?
I don't know. I'm not proposing a law or anything, but I wish something could be done to protect against lawsuits that are demanding vast sums of money. So media organizations, rather than fight, they settle or they back down. And that's happened at local levels. I mean, in my time at the Arizona Republic, the newspaper's ability to, or willingness to spend money on attorneys became much more sharpened and much more narrowed because attorneys cost a lot of money. Yeah, it wasn't always that way, but it's gotten harder, and that sends a signal that we're not going to take your fight over a public record real seriously because we know you're not gonna sue us, says state government, because you don't have the money to do that. And of course, on the biggest stage, we've seen, with Trump's lawsuits against ABC and CBS, the kind of money that he's received from those media outlets, because there's a belief that, at least in part, their decisions to not fight was because it would be too expensive. You're fighting the federal government, which has unlimited sums of money. But I don't know how you fix that legally.
Are there any unions or nonprofits or any pro bono legal work to sort of support newsrooms?
Well, yes, there are. I help run the Best of the West journalism contest, and the money that we raise from that contest, which celebrates the best journalism in 14 Western states, we use our proceeds to fund First Amendment hotlines throughout the West. This organization's been at it since 1986, and I forget now how much money we've handed out over the many decades. And there are organizations that exist in a number of Western states to provide legal advice for journalists that are working on access and First Amendment issues. Sadly, there was a First Amendment coalition in Arizona, and for a while, way back in the day, I was president for 2 terms, but it appears to have gone defunct, and it would be nice to see that revived. It's sort of everybody kicks in some funding to help pay for legal costs, because attorneys don't work for free. But such things do exist, and there's national or organizations, the Journalists Committee for Freedom of the Press, et cetera, that can be used. But it's really important to have that on a local level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nothing.
We're fortunate in Arizona to have the First Amendment Clinic at the Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law, College of Law, that provides support for First Amendment rights related to freedom of speech, freedom of press, and other First Amendment rights. There are clinics at a number of law schools around the country, as well as nonprofit organizations like Mary Jo was talking about. And there are increasingly more resources for student journalists as well. Student Press Freedom Day is coming up this week to celebrate the importance of press freedom for student journalists. The Student Press Law Center is leading this programming, and it's important to know that they have a legal hotline for student journalists. And FIRE also has started a hotline to provide legal advice for student journalists.
Yeah, that's amazing that there are those resources specifically for, young journalists starting out. And to that, we have a question. So young people often get news through social media. What skills or habits are most important for helping younger voters distinguish between legitimate reporting and manipulated content?
I mean, I can speak as a young person, like what I tell my friends and things is I think the most important thing is it's fine to get information from social media, but when you read the headline of a news article, you don't know the story. I think what's important is to kind of gain knowledge and follow up on that knowledge. I think what's important is going from social media and then looking for the full story and actually reading what's there as opposed to what the headline is. I can't think of one news organization, no matter what side they fall on, that hasn't let a headline slip that's a little misleading. And I think that what's important is actually taking the time to read the story, taking the time to follow news organizations that are credible, and then seeing what they've done with the reporting beyond what can fit in an Instagram caption. So to me as a young person, that's like the thing I tell all my friends is if we're going to talk about the news, we can't talk about the headlines. We have to talk about the stories and the reporting that goes into it. And I think that that's also just a big part of respecting the journalists who are doing the work. Click on the story, read the story. Don't just look at the headline, take the headline and then go to Google and see what else you can find on it is like my biggest recommendation to people my age and, older people who are finding it on Facebook. My mom is a headline fanatic and we really have these conversations and I think it's important to encourage people to feel empowered to take that and see what else they can get.
Absolutely. Taking that extra, minute or two to research a story, expands your perspective and knowledge on it.
Yeah, I'll jump in here too. I think the importance of media literacy in general could not be underestimated. And it's a generational thing as well as the source in which you spend most of your time receiving news. I find as a journalist for myself, my friends are always coming to me as like, what should I know about or what really happened with this story? And I think we need to figure out how to cross that divide with younger generations and get to a place where they care enough to go and seek out that information themselves instead of it being fed to them through like a short video clip. I don't have the answer to that, but I think it's really important to get there. Um, there's also a lot of important media literacy training about what is a trusted news source and what is a more biased one. So just more awareness around that, and also uh, understanding the prevalence of AI now, especially in news, and looking for little signs that can tell you when a video is AI generated or content is AI generated. In general, I think that's important to just create more awareness around too.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us here would benefit from, that understanding. Do any of you have any examples of how to detect possible AI or deep fakes or anything like that?
I think we actually at the Arizona Agenda, I work with my colleague Hank Stevenson, made a deep fake of Carrie Lake a couple of years ago. And while it was a silly thing, it was an exercise in showing people how easy this is and little things you can spot to tell if something is AI generated. Um, the syncing of the speech and mouth not moving together is a good sign. Um, things that just look kind of uncanny in general. It's hard because when you're on your phone all the time, you train yourself to see when things look a little bit off. But there's little things like that where you'll often see, hey, that's not completely right, or that doesn't look like the other content I watch. But that's very hard to train, especially for older generations.
Yeah. All right. So we have one question, and this is for, your discretion if you want to answer or not. But, in general, as are reporters in America fearful for their safety? And have any of you experienced like personal safety concerns due to your job responsibilities and reporting, on site?
Yeah, I can talk about this. Um, for me personally, I wouldn't say I'm fearful. I'm definitely more aware of what's happening around me when I go to protests, especially to cover them. Um, our editors have told us if a protest feels like it's getting too out of hand, out of control, go ahead and leave, get yourself to a safe space. They would rather see that we're safe versus, getting the story. Um, in the past, when I was at the Oklahoman covering the Oklahoma state legislature, if I went to a protest, I had a buddy with me, and often our buddy was the photographer that would come with us. So using that buddy system is a really good idea. But yeah, I would say it's not fearful, just really hyper aware of my surroundings and what's going on around me.
And have you felt more of that in the last couple of years, or just has it been always a part of the job and something that you have to think about?
I mean, I think it's always been part of the job. That's what you're taught in journalism school. I remember my professors at Cronkite telling us that if we were at a protest and it got to feel too unsafe, like worry about your own safety, make sure yourself is safe. I think it's definitely increased in the past few years. Especially from the topics we've seen come through the legislature, everything from immigration to, transgender rights and things like that. So it's definitely increased.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I also
Um,
think with sorry, real quick, social media I think is like has opened it up and kind of normalized talking to people in a way that's so disconnected from what reality is. Like we're real people. I'm 22 and people have messaged me on, you know, Twitter during Israel-Palestine protests and told me to like be careful on Friday and like just this ominous things and I think that they forget like I'm a young woman who's doing this because I love it and I feel really passionate about it and for some reason we've lost the humanity aspect because they see me online and forget that I'm a student journalist. I'm learning and I'm trying to convey information. So I also think there's this lack of accountability on from people sending these things to journalists and reporters that they forget that this is the job. I don't see them doing it. So I mean, we are here trying to, seek truth and report it. That's what they always say. So um, I think that sometimes there can be a lack of respect for journalist that's dangerous. And I think people forget that, we're doing our best too, and it's not always perfect, but it's what has to be done. So I think that that's a really important piece too, is that we need to be defending and on the lookout for, our reporters. I get far more nasty emails than I do nice ones. So this is also a great reminder to send your favorite journalists. I really loved this. I thought you did a great job because those are not things that we see. I get the scary, ominous email telling me to be careful on Friday at 3 p.m. So if you have a journalist that you really love, it does matter because we don't get that kind of noise. We get the negative. So,
Absolutely. It's always important to highlight the positives. And I love that you pointed out like social media because I think, that's a big part of being a journalist as well, and exposing yourself to that space. Are there any particular guardrails or steps you all take to sort of protect or have a barrier between that?
Since 2020, a number of organizations have worked on creating resources for training journalists and journalism students about safety, especially online, and helping journalism students and journalists recognize what harassment is, what intimidation is, what are threats, teaching us that if we receive these messages, we need to be taking screenshots of them and recording them, because if it raises to a level that we want to contact law enforcement, they're going to ask, where's the evidence? So while it might be tempting to just delete something and hope it all goes away, it's really important for us to be saving these things and thinking carefully about, do we feel safe or not? And to legitimize those feelings. While we don't want to normalize harassment or threats in any way, we want to support each other and make sure that each of us feels safe. So as Alysa said, and as Jordan said, we think carefully about our systems, especially if going to protests, to think about what threats might arise when we get there. How do we make sure we're safe? We need to make sure that people know where we're going, if we might be going into risky situations, thinking about whether it's safe for us to take electronics along, whether being identified as members of the press makes us safer or might actually make us more vulnerable. So it's lots of different things that we're thinking through together systematically. But I will say, while it can be very scary to think about these things, we are fortunate that it's still safer to be a journalist in this country than it is in many other countries in the United States. And I see journalists and journalism supporters working to make it safer for journalists all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So next we have a question for Jordan. Do you want to make a pitch for how informative reading at the Arizona Capitol Times would be for those of us using RTS on bills coming up?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Thank you for the question. Um, yeah, I would say so. I mean, we don't just write for fun. We love covering this stuff. For me personally, I really love politics and government in journalism, and that's my cup of tea. Um, we try to cover a lot of meetings and a lot of bills as possible. Now, we are only a team of 4 journalists with 3 editors, and 2 other people helping us out. So be patient a little bit. I got behind last week on covering like 2 or 3 stories that haven't even published yet. So they're getting there. We try to go to as many meetings as possible in the House and the Senate and any press conferences that come up. If we're not there in person, we're usually watching online from the office, which has been really beneficial, especially on a busy day where we don't have time to get down to the Capitol. But yeah, I mean, you know, please support, please read our work. And that goes for all the other panelists on this in this discussion as well.
Yeah. Do you find any particular user-friendly or features of the Arizona Ledge website that you use that really enhances or helps your work, Jordan?
Yeah, so just about every morning I usually log on to the calendar. I'm not I have it bookmarked, and for me, it's called Alice, Alis, and that'll give you a list of like everything that's going on at the Capitol every weekday and weekends too sometimes. Um, House and Senate calendars are there, plus committee agendas and floor sessions, committee of the whole, things like that. Press conferences going on. So that's like my number one go-to. When bills are being filed, I will go to, the huge long list of bills that they have. So those are the 2 I find most helpful. And then also the archived meetings from all the recordings, that is extremely helpful. And actually, our parent company, State Affairs, has a legislative tool that we use, and it gets those videos and then actually transcribes. So that's been really helpful for us, especially if we can't make it to the meeting in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, are there any like features of like the Arizona Capitol that you specifically report on?
There's not a certain chamber or sort of faction of government. We kind of do it all, an overview of the things, and I try to focus my attention on things that will affect people the most.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because especially like for crossover week and floor votes coming up, is there anything like we can anticipate as like bills cross over? A lot of bills are dying. Anything like that?
Yeah, next, I'm not looking forward to this week. It's going to be an insane days of long sessions on the floor. Lawmakers are going to try to push out as many bills as possible this coming week, because after crossover week is when a bill has to cross over from the House to the Senate and vice versa to continue in the legislative process. So we see sort of a rush to do that during crossover week. That being said, in the Arizona legislature, a bill is never truly dead. There's a bunch of different mechanics that go into that and little ploys you can play to make a bill, to resurrect a bill from the dead. However, that's also dependent on sort of the power you hold, like in the legislative process. So it is, if you really do want a bill to cross the finish line, this is the week we'll see that happen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. And for voters who want to stay informed without burning out, what's the best approach?
Yeah, that's hard. I struggle with that myself because it seems like lately it's just like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And as journalists, we're not afforded the luxury of just turning off our phones or stopping those notifications. However, I would go against my own advice and try to take things in moderation, especially nowadays when everything is very um, depressing. But I'd also make sure you're balancing that with, keeping yourself informed, because information is such an important part of power and knowing what's going on in your world and how you can interact with it.
Yeah,
Boy,
absolutely.
listening to Jordan and Nicole, I'm not sad that I stepped away from the daily mix master of what goes on at the Capitol. I would think for voters who want to stay informed, I mean, read the agenda, the Arizona agenda, and read the Arizona Capitol Times, because they're out, and read the Arizona Republic. They're out there on the ground. They do a lot of the work for you, especially the agenda. They aggregate. They read everything else, so you don't have to. And they highlight it, and we'll link to it if you want to read more detail. It's a big pitch for the agenda. That's one way to do it. And then if there are voters that are, just have a specific issue or or two that they're interested in, just track those and try to not get distracted by all the sideshows, although that's really, really hard to do. There are also advocacy groups that are out there. So like for the league, I would assume that many of the members are interested in what's happening with legislation that pertains to elections and how those are conducted. You can, follow that through, all voting is local. I'm going to go crazy trying to remember all the groups, but there are advocates that will be putting out alerts on that, and that's also where the RTS system is helpful for getting your voice in there.
Thanks, Mary Jo, for all of those resources. I think coalitions and knowledge is so important in fighting all of these ridiculous bills that can come through. Gittel, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to follow up on what Mary Jo said and just let everybody know that the league also follows categories of bills and weighs in and analyzes voting rights bills, education bills, criminal justice bills, some water bills. So you are all more than welcome. You're all more than welcome to join the league, but even if you're not a league member, you can sign up for our newsletter and get our calls to action for RTS. And I think at the end, Kara's got a slide that has a link to the league website, and you can sign up for our newsletter on there. So I just wanted to make a pitch for the work that we are doing, which is completely nonpartisan. So thank you.
Thanks, Gittel. We have a question. What is the relationship, if any, between Arizona agenda and Tucson agenda?
Yes, we're all the same people. We all log on to the same Zoom meeting every day. The Tucson agenda was actually born as like a faction of the Arizona agenda. We trying to create a whole brand here called the Agendaverse, but the Arizona agenda is focused on the state capital, state government policy. Tucson agenda is written by a former Arizona Daily Star reporter named Joe Ferguson, who knows all about the politics down there, city council, board of supervisors, and does the same thing we try to do at the Arizona agenda, but make government processes more accessible at the local level down there in Tucson. So highly recommend if you're interested in Southern Arizona politics.
I was the intern for the Arizona Agendaverse. The amount of work that they do there is insane. I cannot recommend enough that you all check it out. I mean, Nicole knows this because I gush about her all the time. I just think she's the coolest. But the agenda has the education agenda, water agenda, AI agenda, and it's like a very small team that every day I would show up and go, how does this happen? And every day it comes out with just such a great understanding of what Arizonans are looking for in the way of covering politics. And the reason I was drawn to it was because it's digestible. It's politics for people who want to understand and not have to learn about, legislative jargon. They kind of handle that for you and they make it fun. So, yeah, I just cannot recommend enough. And like Nicole's just the coolest. So, highly recommend.
Thank you, Alyssa. And going off of that, why is local journalism so critical to democracy? Many of you have been or are a part of local journalism. And what gives you hope about the future of journalism and democracy in Arizona?
Well, local journalism tells you what's going on in your immediate universe, your smaller world that you live in day to day. I mean, if you're not paying attention to your local city government, to what your police departments are doing, it's you're at a disadvantage. I mean, look at the outcry that happened in Gilbert and their big fight over raising water rates. And now, the city of Phoenix is looking at, a big hike in garbage rates, which are going to affect people's, the bills they have and their budgets at home. It's very important to pay attention to those kind of things. And you have probably more of an impact on the elected officials that make those local decisions. Your city council member is probably, you got a better chance getting their ear than getting the governor, or getting Mark Kelly or Ruben Gallego to listen to you. So, but the way to keep up with what's going on is to follow local journalism. The Washington Post and New York Times is not going to be writing about, what the city of Mesa is doing, unless it's something, extraordinary, bizarre, groundbreaking. But the day-to-day work is covered by local journalists. And it's important to keep up on top of that.
Yeah, local journalism is essential for the health of any community. There are studies suggesting that there's more corruption in communities that do not have local journalism. So we all benefit from having local journalism and finding more ways to support local journalism.
Yeah, just to go off what Mary Jo and Erin said, I used to be the editor of my hometown newspaper, which my hometown is about 1,200 people, so very small audience, but I absolutely loved covering city council and school board, and knowing what was going on, even more than I did when I was actually growing up there. So for the journalists who do that hyperlocal work in those smaller rural areas, it's really important, and I really loved it. I like working in a big city too. It's been fun, but it's what we do. And also my hometown newspaper no longer exists. It went away during the pandemic, got sold to another kind of our competitor actually, and they combined it with their news products. So that paper does no longer exist.
And have we seen a lot of local newspapers that went away during COVID, and what sort of impact did that have in today?
People just don't know what's going on. I see questions and comments all the time on my town's Facebook page that we have now, and people are just constantly wondering, what's happening with water, what's happening with, garbage, things that like affect people's daily lives. Luckily, a newspaper that I was also the editor for, the Caledonia Argus, picked up some of our local coverage. So they're not totally, without news, but there's, but you still have to subscribe to it, to get the online access, to get the print edition. So it's leaving people uninformed and for rumors to fly, honestly.
Yeah. Well, moving on, we have Carolyn, who I believe is from Tucson. And obviously, going on down there is the national coverage on the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. And are there any comments any of our panelists have on that coverage and the impact it's had on, the Tucson and Arizona community as a whole? Has anyone been following the story?
I haven't really been following it up that close. Like I said, we got the Tucson agenda that has to worry about that. But one thing I would say is like kind of tying it back to the importance of local media and supporting independent journalists. Um, it's those like local news stations and local papers that are going to make the most groundwork and those sort of things when the entire national press corps flies in and sort of tries to co-opt big tragedies like that. You often seeing them miss key points of context, like this neighborhood where Nancy lived, and there's just so much contextual things to know about an area that's so important when covering those kinds of things, and you're going to get that from like a Tucson reporter instead of like ABC or something. I think that's just kind of a case study for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that case specifically, we also saw a lot of like rumors and news stories just coming out every hour. So would you say the best case scenario then would just to be to follow your local journalist newspaper rather than like national coverage?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a healthy balance there too of having an expanded news diet, if you will. But I think you're going to get the most effective on the ground reporting from people who live in the area and know the area. And like I started my journalism career in Tucson, and I remember talking to Chris Nanos, the Pima County Sheriff, who's now, catching some flack for how he's handled the case. And I remember how he handled stories that I would call him for. And so I know how to work with him and how to ask him questions. There's a very specific relationship you find with sources. So I think that context is immensely important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. Are there any additional developments, pressures, or trends affecting media in Arizona or nationally that we haven't discussed yet, but you believe are important for the public and us to understand?
One thing we've seen recently, and I think it was a week or two ago now, um, a reporter from Courthouse News was removed out of a House committee meeting for taking photos of the legislators while he was news gathering. We ran that story, and to watch it on the live stream, you can go back and watch it. It's just kind of jarring. I've never seen that happen to a reporter, and you tend to hear about it in like national media or I guess maybe in places like New York or DC, you never think it'll happen in your own state capital, but it did. So that was pretty jarring. We've seen a little bit of reactive behavior from committee chairs. We did a story on it at the Cap Times, pulled all four of our reporters in on the story, and just a lot of like kind of contentious meetings leading to people getting removed. whether they were disrupting a meeting or not. So we've just kind of kept an eye on things like that this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alyssa, obviously, you're our DC reporter out there. Is there anything that you've seen, coming from Arizona and covering this Arizona politics, moving on to national? Is there anything that, on the national scale that you've seen that's different? Arguably, we've seen some misogynistic comments made. How have reporters been dealing with that, and you yourself?
I think all of us can agree, like journalism is so rooted in support of one another, and I think that that's a really good like united front. I've from the first day I went to the Capitol with my little press badge and had to ask people where to set down my coat. Like everyone's just so welcoming and fosters a community of support for one another. I don't think it's nearly as competitive personally as people maybe have an imagination of what journalism's like on the inside. What it's really about is supporting each other and building each other up. And sure, our news organizations can be rivals, but when it comes down to it, we're all there to do a job. Specifically, women in journalism, I could not feel more supported by the community of female reporters. And I think whether that's in Arizona, whether that's in, DC, finding that core group of female reporters who are all there to cover politics and feel passionate and, are trying to build careers together is just, it's a really supportive community that I think maybe goes unnoticed. But I just have the utmost respect and I'm in awe of like all the female reporters I know. So the fact I was asked to be on a panel with Mary Jo was like I was like starstruck. I still am right now. So I mean, it's just things like that where it's you know, when you find the community and you learn about the community, um, that's really what it's about.
When can I add to this?
Yeah.
Again, emphasizing something that Mary Jo said earlier, where I think when we see stories about news organizations closing down, there are questions about what happens to these journalists. And Mary Jo made a really important point that there are still journalism jobs, right? And we need journalists desperately in this country, especially at this time. And I am very impressed with how many journalists are engaging in innovation and sometimes being called content creators rather than journalists, as they are working on sometimes creating hyper local media, other times specializing in specific areas to go deeper and make sure that people are still receiving the information that is so important to receive in a democratic republic.
Absolutely. I mean, journalism is one of the key cornerstones of our democracy, and I think we all have a privilege of listening to the five of you today talk about your experiences. And so, us at the League of Women Voters, how can organizations like LWV help combat information and promote civic engagement?
I think doing things like this, platforming voices of people in the media, sort of using the following you have to direct them towards journalists like us, local journalism who's on the ground goes a very long way. Um, and just pointing people to sources and independent journalism really helps us a lot.
Voter registration outreach is also very important. And I know it's been something that the league has done for a long time, to be nonpartisan registrars of voters. And that's getting a little harder, with some of the legislation that we've seen at the state capitol, uh, for some of the limitations they want to put on that. But like Nicole said, forums such as this, getting your message out through other outlets, your own website, maybe the occasional news conference, although I think we've all gone to tons and tons of news conferences. It's hard to hit all of them that happen.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job with events like this one. To add to what's already been said, I appreciate that you're asking questions about how to reach young voters and educate young voters as well, and thinking about working with schools, going into schools, working with other community organizations, partnering with community professionals and communications organizations to create more educational materials could be vital right now.
Absolutely. And I do want to point out our website, Vote 411. It's our nonpartisan voting guide that can be available all throughout, even non-election years. It holds a ton of resources on checking your voter registration and, seeing what the polling places in your area are. And during election seasons, we do send out questionnaires to each and every candidate that runs in Arizona elections. So I do want to shout that out. And the last question I have is, if attendees leave today remembering just one habit for staying informed and engaged, what should it be? And any action items for our audience?
I'm
I
gonna
guess
say, oh, Jordan, you go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I guess I was gonna say follow us on our social medias. I am on X and I do have an account on Blue Sky. I haven't logged in a while. That's my bad. I will work on that. But yeah, read our work and give us a follow. If you see us out in public, say hi. I'm more than happy to chat with people. Just, support journalism. We love doing it. I love doing it. I've been in the industry for 10 years now. I don't really want to do anything else, even if journalism does drive me crazy some days. But yeah, just, follow our work.
I was going to say follow an expansive group, follow the young journalists, follow the lifetime journalists who's built a career and a trusted fan base and readership. I think just following people who are every step of the journey is really important to getting a well-rounded media diet.
I guess I would say read and listen critically. Just sort of question what you're hearing, and there's always resources to go and do some of your own fact checking, thanks to computers.
Nicole, Erin?
Well, I think I would add to this to have conversations about the media that you are consuming and try not to be fearful that you might be consuming sources that other people are not consuming. And rather than fearing assumptions that might be made, see this as a really amazing opportunity to learn from each other and learn about different sources of media and to promote a healthy marketplace of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say as well, talk to people about it. I mean, talk to your friends about it. My mom always taught me growing up that it's impolite to talk about politics. And now look at, that's what I do for a living. I think it's so important to, hey, did you hear about this story? Or no, I heard this actually. That natural back and forth that occurs when you are engaged and hang out with other people too is so important for building a community that cares about the decisions their politicians are making on their behalf. So I think, trying to get past that, it's improper to talk about politics thing is important too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for your wonderful insights and the work you all do in your respective roles. It has sincerely been a pleasure to moderate this panel. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Gittel or Kara to sort of conclude the program.
Thank you, Emra. Thank you, everyone. I'm waiting for Gretchen's going to show a slide real quick that has the rest of our Lunch and Learn week. I want to encourage, as Gatel did in the beginning, the League puts a lot of work into Legislative Week, and it's open to the public. These are virtual sessions. When we get to the next slide, and there's a QR code here for you to register, but we have a lot of exciting agenda items coming up. As you can read there, what the 2024 election tells us about 2026, protecting voter rolls, education in Arizona, how the legislative process works, and one person, one vote. So I encourage everybody to sign up for those. We have very interesting panels, much like we had today on media. So we're excited to continue our Legislative Week Lunch and Learns. So thank you for that. And we have one final slide, I believe, which has all of our own social media. This is how you can get in touch with the League and follow us and stay connected to the work that the League is doing. And of course, join the League, donate to the League, send the League's content to your networks and your peer groups. We very much appreciate that. I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank all the League volunteers who helped put this together today. And I want to thank, of course, our attendees. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with the League and our guests. Appreciate it very much. Everyone have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.